Okay, so welcome everyone to the first ever World Infringement Congress. So this is a great opportunity to use this old bank space here in the working class neighborhood of Point St. Charles. So I wanted to begin by thanking Peter in the back, who's in charge of this space.
Thank you.
And who's welcomed us here. Now, secondly, we have a video game which was created by Professor Jennifer Seaman Cook, and it's called A Fringe Story. It's about her experience in Toronto as they were preparing to demolish the Mirvish Village and build a condominium complex on this historic neighborhood. And so if you have a phone that's a smartphone, the instructions are on the door outside. You'll see there's these little sort of codes around the room, and the idea is, I guess, you just sort of click with your phone on the code, and you can see maybe an interview or something along those lines that she sort of cooked up while she was out there. The washroom is located just through those curtains over there on your left. And last but not least, we're going to be changing the schedule just a little bit today just to accommodate some of our guests. So we're going to be basically starting with Kazai Deer, who's going to be talking about Trump, globalization, and infringement. Then I'm going to do the WTF show, and then we'll either have lunch or Fergus will speak, and then we'll sort of go on with the regular schedule for the rest of the afternoon. So without further ado, I would like to invite Kazai Deer to the stage. Okay, so welcome to part 2 of the World Infringement Congress. So this is a performance called WTF, What the Fringe. You'll notice that I've had to remove the letter I there because it's actually illegal to use that word without permission in Canada. It has been trademarked, and so this is how we get around it in this way. Now, just to let you know, this is sort of a performance lecture, so you are encouraged to yell out if you want. And what I ask you to sort of cry out is if you find anything at all sort of objectionable here on the PowerPoint, just feel free to yell out, "What the fringe?" Okay, so let's just do a little practice here. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3.
What the fringe?
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, anytime you see anything that looks sketchy or unusual or questionable, feel free to just yell it out, whisper it, whatever you like. So we're going to get started. So Josh, we're going to begin. Okay, so basically something came into existence in 2012 called the World Fringe Congress. And I was actually invited to this Congress even though I run an infringement festival, and I thought there had been a mistake. And so I said, "Are you really sure you want me to come to this?" And after much deliberation, they decided that yes, my ideas were welcome in Edinburgh at this wonderful Congress. And so basically I packed my bags, bought a ticket to Edinburgh, and went out to sort of have a discussion with fringe managers from all around the world. So basically the first Congress involved about 41 or maybe some more fringe festivals, 13 countries, 60 different delegates. And so all these people descended for the first time ever onto Edinburgh, Scotland, which is of course where the original Fringe Festival was founded. So you can see here, I actually had a letter of invitation. So, very nice, you know. It was a really sweet thing that they did for me. And so this is how my adventure began. Now the reason why I wasn't sure if I'd be welcomed in Edinburgh was because we got kicked out of the Fringe. And this happened in 2001. And we had a show called Car Stories here in Montreal whereby, you know, people would just sort of go through cars. It was a very small show, only 3 people could attend at a time. And so we had about 20 actors. So of course we were not making any money. We also had to pay a lot of fees to be associated with the Fringe, even though we were just in a parking lot. And so in a nutshell, this is how you can get kicked out of the Fringe quite easily. So basically I wrote an open letter to the critic of the newspaper, and she had shown up at the performance and she had demanded a free ticket. Now the box office girl refused her the free ticket, but in character. So she was like, "Look lady, we ain't giving it to you, we gotta pay 20 actors, these are starving artists." And so the theater critic got angry, she crumpled up her paper, threw it at the box office girl, stormed off. So I wrote this very cheeky letter to the editor, again in character, and so I'm saying things, people are calling her Scarface because she got a paper cut from the paper. Please give her the money. We're starving artists, etc., etc. And so in a nutshell, after this was sent to the editor, we asked, do you mind if we post it at the Fringe's beer tent where people post Fringe reviews? And they said, oh yeah, by all means. And so we posted it up there. Big mistake. The next day she came, saw this up on the wall, got very angry, stormed out of the Fringe, and that was it. She said she was not going to review any more shows at the Fringe due to this incident. So we were told by the Fringe management that the paper was going to launch a slander suit against us because of this, and that everyone would suffer because of our actions. Basically what happened then is we got kicked out of the Fringe, and the next day the critic came back and continued reviewing things. And so this is pretty much what's called a conflict of interest sponsor. It's someone who's both the corporate sponsor and reporting on it. So an awful lot of power concentrated into one place. So we did play car stories on the fringe of the Fringe for about a year or two, but then we realized in 2004, well, why not make our own festival? I mean, we could do this. I mean, I did help set up the Fringe in Montreal in the first place when it was first founded. And so we set up this Infringement Festival in 2004. And so you can see the sort of impact it had at the beginning. The media was talking about how this is more Fringe than Fringe. The Canada Council gave us about $20,000, and so we started taking it on the road and sort of starting smaller infringements in other places like Ottawa and Toronto. Now, getting back to Edinburgh, you can see it's a very beautiful city. It actually has this big castle right up in the middle of the town. This is sort of what it looks like during the Fringe time. Every single place is converted into a venue. They set up tents on the commons and things like this. So it's very much the sort of place that's buzzing at this time of year. Normally it's a quieter town. Now a little bit of history about the Fringe. It was founded in 1947 in Edinburgh. And the reason it was founded was because, on the heels of World War II, the government wanted to provide something for the citizens to try to get life back to normal. And so they wanted to boost the morale of the citizens. They invited professional acts to the Edinburgh International Festival. Now, when the local artists expressed a wish to play at this festival, they were told, sorry, but it's for professionals, but you are most welcome to be in the audience. Now, they weren't really happy about this. They wanted to play in the festival. And so after being told no, that they could not perform in the festival, they threatened to play on the fringe of this original festival. And sure enough, they made good on their threat. The following year, according to the journalist Robert Kemp, he said, "Round the fringe of official festival drama, there seems to be more private enterprise than before. I'm afraid some of us are not going to be at home during the evenings." Now, what happened to the Fringe is it continued to grow in Edinburgh, but then it started multiplying into other fringes all around the world. And so you can just see here, for example, the various different ones in North America. And this is from a few years ago, so there's a lot more of them now. Now, the festivals also began to start suffering from corporate interference. So basically what happened was originally it was all run by artists, basically people who were volunteering their time to put this together. And so the volunteer organizers, some of them became professional administrators with salaries. Now of course when you want to pay a salary, you need to get that money from somewhere. So where did they get the money from? Well, the artists had to start paying to play at the Fringe.
What the Fringe?
Now the Fringe also began seeking out corporate sponsors, government money or taxpayers' dollars. They started to add service charges onto tickets, making it more expensive to attend. And so you can see there's all these different sort of strategies to take a little bit of money off of all the different elements involved in order to sort of fund the administration of something that was originally artist-run and that was free. Now, this has become such a big problem today across the world, and that's because we have many, many examples whereby, the people in the arts who have money are not the artists. A lot of people are saying that there's a 1% And that 1% is pretty much made up of arts administrators and bureaucrats. So you have all these different examples in this article, for example, of an artist going to a co-op to do work, and they have to pay to work there, and yet the CEO is sort of driving in a Ferrari to come to work and earning a six-figure salary. And so this is a common problem that we're seeing more and more across the world with globalization. We're starting to see more sort of sucking away of resources from the people like the artists, and more sort of putting them into the hands of the administration. Now, a little history about Edinburgh Fringe. So it all started with only 8 companies at the beginning in 1947. It started growing. We had 19 companies about 12 years later. And then in 1959, the same year, the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society was formed. So this was the first administration. The first paid employee was in 1971. And by 2012, there were about 15 paid staff working for this organization. Now in Canada, they did something a little bit different. They decided to try to consolidate all of these fringe festivals together with something called the Canadian Association of Fringe Festivals. And they actually decided in 1998 to trademark the word fringe and the word fringe festivals on Bay Street. And that's, for those of you who aren't Canadian, that's sort of like the Wall Street of Canada.
What the French?
Thank you. So they trademarked the word fringe and fringe festival, and they basically began telling people, look, this is ours, you're not allowed to use it anymore without our permission. Now, allegedly, they trademarked this word, according to their websites and whatnot. This was the purpose, according to the Association of Fringe Festivals. It is to preserve fringe ideals and principles. Now, I don't know exactly what that means. If you think of the original fringe, the ideals and principles would be, it's a group of artists who were excluded from a festival, and so they went and played on the fringe. What it means today, I guess it's perhaps not the same thing, because if you go to the website of the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, and this is where they actually trademarked it, you can see that it wasn't necessarily for these original ideals of the fringe, but was in fact for financial purposes. And this includes the selling of fringe-related wares and services. And by this, what I'm talking about is T-shirts, mugs, caps, brochures, programs, posters, and mugs, bookmarks, calendars, decals, collectible cards, greeting cards, notepads, diaries, pens, glasses, mugs, tumblers, memo pads, keychains, bumper stickers, adult and children's clothing, mainly shirts, pants, woven shirts, polo shirts, fleece shirts, sweaters, tank tops, sweatpants, shorts, scarves, hats, caps, and sun visors, umbrellas, handheld fans, and cushions.
Cushions, what the French?
Thank you. And the services being the presentation, the advertisement, and the promotion of theater productions. This is like the legal reason why this was trademarked. If you go on the site of the trademark office, this is what you find there. Good afternoon, ladies. We have the burlesque dancers here from Buffalo, the Sunshine Sisters. Please feel free to grab a seat, grab some coffee. Okay, so we'll continue. Okay, so basically in Canada, it's now illegal to use the word fringe or fringe festival without permission from the Canadian Association of Fringe Festivals. And they have actually threatened legal action in the past against artists and students who attempted to use the F word.
What the French, man?
So you can see different articles about this. It's quite remarkable when a student gets a legal letter because they just wanted to do a bit of fringe theater as part of their training. Now in the United Kingdom, thankfully the word fringe is not trademarked. Thank you so much for those of you in the United Kingdom for not having trademarked it. They only trademark the Fringe Festival logos, designs, and colors. And, I think that's definitely much fairer than trying to trademark the entire fringe. Now, one of the reasons this is problematic is with globalization, we're seeing people trying to trademark everything. As I mentioned earlier, there is nothing in the forces of late capitalism that is protected from these forces that want to basically make a profit off of whatever they can get. A couple of examples, we had Disney trying to trademark the Day of the Dead. Now this is a Mexican holiday where people actually visit their dead relatives. This is the purpose of it. and Disney wanted to trademark that. I think they made a movie about it. Luckily, there was a huge backlash in Mexico, and they had to back off, and so now the people can still visit their dead relatives without having Disney as a middle person. You also had the Tooth Fairy. Someone tried to trademark the Tooth Fairy. So if you think of, you know, when you're a kid, your parents put some money under the pillow and take away the tooth. Well, in this case, you know, again, you would have had some sort of corporation called the realtoothfairies.com somehow mediating that experience. And here in Quebec, just recently, this just happened in the month of July, someone actually tried to trademark the red square. And so that's this symbol here. And again, if you're not from Quebec or you haven't been in this area recently, there were massive student protests just a few years ago when the government tried to double tuition. And the students had this red square, which means carré dans le rouge, or deep in the red, squarely in the red, and so that's why they had it. And so luckily the students actually won this protest. The government had to back down. But sure enough, a couple of years later, some business person with nothing to do with this protest decided, oh, I'm going to trademark this red square and make a little bit of money off of it. Well, thank goodness the lawyer Harold Ashenmill, the famous Canadian trademark lawyer, stepped in and prevented this red square from being trademarked. It is now untrademarkable. Now, some of the Fringe festivals have also been sponsored or even renamed after corporations. This is a strategy called cross-branding. For example, the Montreal Fringe, which is what we first established here in 1991, is now called the St. Ambroise Fringe. So it's actually been named after a beer company.
What the fringe, man?
You've got many other examples of this. You've got things like a lot of banks tend to sponsor the fringes. Things like the first Niagara Rochester Fringe. This is a new one. The ATD Financial Fringe Theatre Adventures. I think that's Edmonton. And some of them are still just called the Fringe, but they do actually put the trademark up there as well. So that one I think is the London Fringe. Here's another example. So before we had the Dublin Fringe Festival in Ireland. After the cross-branding strategy was complete, it's now the Absolute Fringe. You don't even have the name of the city anymore, so it's very hard to tell where exactly it is. Now, I think it's been rebranded yet again, and now it's called the Tiger Dublin Fringe. Now, if you don't know what Tiger is, it's actually this beer that's from Singapore. So it's kind of like the Pabst Blue Ribbon of Ireland, I guess. It's not like the Guinness Fringe.
What the fringe?
Yeah, so they picked like the crappiest beer. It's like 2.5-star rating, and now that it's named after this, they're trying to persuade Irish people who have great beer to start drinking crappy beer. So yeah. This one's the Disney Fringe. In Orlando, it's actually sponsored by Disney. And so this is problematic in many cases. I'll tell you why. You can see, you know, the Disney World Resort being one of the sponsors, along with many others, media, Hard Rock Cafe, etc. But the problem is that Disney, even though it's sort of intended to provide children with entertainment, you know, and also merchandise, of course, a lot of that merchandise is made in the third world by children for sale in places like Europe and North America. And so, you know, on the one hand, you're buying this very expensive stuff for your kids here, but on the other hand, it's children making it in a sweatshop on the other side of the planet. Yeah, and so we've got this idea of trying to stop child labor. Now, of course, if you know, Disney is doing this, it's going to be impossible to stop child labor. And instead of addressing these issues and saying, well, maybe, you know, we should tell them you're only allowed to sponsor us if you stop the child labor, instead you've got Disney handing out awards to the managers. Now, you may be wondering about these potassium-bearing rocks. Or you may be wondering, like, what does this have to do with the fringe, you know? I mean, this massive area of potassium-bearing rocks, what does this have to do with the fringe? Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? they actually renamed the Saskatoon Fringe the Potash Corp Fringe Theatre Festival.
What the
yes,
frick?
this was originally like a nice small town festival, the Saskatoon Fringe. It's now the Potash Corp Fringe Theatre Festival. What a lovely ring to that. Now, in case you don't know anything about the Potash Corp, it is a $40 billion corporation that extracts natural resources to provide fertilizer for Monsanto and others like that. And so if you sort of look at the environment, it's very much of an industrial environment, and you can see it causes an awful lot of environmental destruction, and they've been criticized for damaging various ecosystems. And again, now this is cross-branded with the Fringe, so it's something that's totally different from the original meaning. So what's the result of all of this blatant cross-branding? Well, the first problem is that artists have to be associated with an unethical corporation if they want to play at the Fringe. So this is pretty sketchy. I mean, as an artist myself, I'm a professional actor. Usually I get paid a lot of money if I'm going to promote some sort of corporation. Whereas here, the artists have to pay to be associated with that unethical corporation. Now also you've got the Fringe's brand as something that was hip, edgy, and underground, and seriously compromised with this cross-branding strategy. I'm sorry, but the Potash Corp Fringe just doesn't sound that cool. The artists are also transformed into a marketing tool for all of these corporations, despite having to pay hundreds of dollars. Again, artists are normally paid to advertise for corporations. The artists are, of course, discouraged from criticizing the Potash Corp or Disney or anything else that's the sponsor. That's a form of censorship. It's also a very clever reversal of the original Fringe, which is designed to benefit corporations at the expense of the artists and the audiences. So the original Fringe, the artists didn't pay anything. They were making a political statement with their art, a statement against exclusion, whereas now the artists pay to play and their art is co-opted to advertise for corporations. And again, this is the forces of globalization moving in and trying to sort of get its hands into everything. Now, if you look more closely at some of these websites, and you sort of go into the back pages where they're trying to attract sponsors and not telling you, oh, it's cool, it's hip, it's edgy, you can see that this is what's being sold, okay? So what they're selling is access to a loyal, engaged, educated, and mobile audience, predominantly in the 18 to 35 age demographic. Brand recognition across an extensive marketing and PR campaign. So you can sort of see what's being sold here. It's the artists that are being sold, and it's the audiences that are being sold to corporations. Now, getting back to this 2012 Congress in Edinburgh, this is me in Edinburgh. So you can see it's a beautiful city. It's a very rainy city as well. It's the umbrella. Now, the first thing I did when I got there is I went to the airport. And I asked them, like, what information can you give me about the Fringe? And so this is what they gave me. They gave me the Fringe Festival's program. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute, like, what about the Edinburgh International Festival? Do you have that program as well? And I said, oh yeah, here you go. And so I had the two programs, and I was leafing through them, and I came to the sponsors page. And so one of these is the Fringe, and one of them is the festival it originally protested against. And I was wondering, can you guess which is which?
What the Fringe?
Does anyone have an idea as to which one is the Fringe, or is this kind of almost the same thing nowadays?
Well, it looks like, if my eyes aren't deceiving me, that they share a sponsor.
Yes, that's true. So you can see that they even have the same sponsor in some cases. So what was once a protest against another festival is now sharing the same corporate sponsor. This sponsor in this case is called Virgin Money. If you know anything about this, it's a man named Richard Branson who's like a jet setter. He's always trying to fly around the world and things like that on a solo flight. But he does this by running the Virgin Company, and Virgin Money is sort of a banking division of that. There's also Virgin Music and other areas as well. And you know, it's not the most ethical company around here. We can see he's hiking credit card interest rates by 50% for tens of thousands of customers. So again, this isn't something that an artist wants to be associated with. Now here's some of the quotations I encountered in the newspapers out there. The Guardian, a very sort of left-wing paper, they said the fringe has lost its edge. It has become an angrily disputed territory, so threatened by commercialism, some believe, that the future of the entire annual international event is in danger. This one's from a fringe veteran named Tommy Shepard. He said, the pay-to-play system means that the rich kid always wins. No matter how funny a working class kid is, if they can't ask mom and dad to give them $5 grand, that's 5,000 pounds, by the way, that's about 10,000 Canadian dollars, they're not going to be able to come up here and perform. So again, something that was once free, now you have to be in a certain demographic, a certain social status if you want to perform there. You need to have $10,000 in your pocket if you want to perform there. So here we have this wonderful image. You have an infringer at the World Fringe Congress. And so you can see I was very much included in this group in 2012 and 2014. It's a very lovely bunch of people in general, despite our perhaps differences about thinking on these issues. Now what it involved was 5 days of a congress. All fringe festivals were invited. There was about 45 there. It was set in this amazing old veterinarian school, which has been converted into sort of a performance space. It involved things like a keynote speech, workshops, breakout sessions, excursions, discussions, luxury and VIP access, members-only clubs. And so for me, as you know, someone who's like an infringer, I was kind of surprised. You know, I thought going to the fringe would be very grungy and underground, but in fact, you know, this is, for example, the keys to the city. We were invited to meet the mayor and all of the culture ministers and, you know, the New York Times, and all of these people were there that an artist would not normally have access to. You also have the private members clubs and these types of things. So, you know, it was sort of this luxurious demi-monde of the administration, if you will. So what are some of the administrator perks? Well, they basically get some of these things. Salaries, that's something that's quite the opposite of the artists who have to pay to play. They have the VIP access, the special members clubs, free travel often, free lodgings often, corporate treatment, status, power, something called cultural gatekeeping. You decide who gets into the fringe and you decide who doesn't. Whereas originally it was for everyone. And so there was also, like, just for example, a wonderful rooftop party with gourmet food, silver service, free alcohol, even fireworks exploding in the sky. So these are just some of my own perks as an administrator. So you can see they're providing complimentary accommodation, VIP access, you know, all of these different sort of perks that are given specifically to the fringe organizers, but not to the fringe artists.
It says there for the artists and producers, though. Sorry, Donovan. Sorry, it actually said on the thing, these facilities are for the artists and producers.
Okay. But not for the artists at the fringe in general. Now, this was a workshop that was being given. And so this one is called, It Is All About the Money, Sponsorship and Investment for Your Fringe. So how to attract major sponsors and how to keep them, how to get funding when you don't make the work, how to calculate your financial value, and fundraising and other sources of income, such as business, local authorities, arts funding bodies, crowdfunding. And it was actually delivered by a man named Barclay Price. I was trying to get the other managers to talk about corporate manipulation at the fringe. Where should we draw the line? Are we just going to let this go free for all, or should we actually make a policy and say, okay, this is where we should stop? You know, maybe we should only accept corporations that don't pose a conflict of interest, or corporations that are deemed as more ethical than other ones. But it was very much a conversation that nobody wanted to have. So this was my challenge, was trying to spread these ideas, and again, most people were not interested in listening, whereas they were very interested in Mr. Price's speech about getting the money and whatnot. Now this is what it cost to play at the Fringe in 2012 in Edinburgh. It was about 400 pounds, that's about 607 US dollars. And what do you get for this fee? Well, you get your show listed in the official Fringe program. And some advice. And that's about it. So basically for a listing, you know, you're paying $600 for your show to be listed in a program. Well, you don't get a venue, that's a few £100 a week, a technician, that's about £50 a day, a place to stay, that's about £20 a day per person. You don't even get your taxes waived in Edinburgh. There's actually a theatre tax that you have to pay for £75 to do theatre. So you're not really getting a lot of support for this very hefty fee. So the result is that the Fringe Theatre is now usually done by people with money. And that's excluding most artists, political activists, and the disadvantaged. And so you're getting a lot of these one-person shows, things like a one-person Star Wars. You're getting a lot of private school plays coming from the United States where the parents can afford to send their kids to the Edinburgh Fringe with their musical. And you also get fluff from wealthy theatre hobbyists.
That's not true, I'm sorry.
What's not true?
I'm an artist and I have many artist friends who go to Edinburgh. There's big shows and there's independent stuff. So this is a little bit black and white.
Okay, well we're going to have a question and answer period after, and you're more than free to agree or disagree. But this was what I found at least, you know. For example, this lady went hitchhiking and so decided to write a show about it. And, you know, it wasn't, you know, like, it wasn't, you know, something that could have been more political. So you can sort of see when you go down the streets, you've got all these, you know, the one-man Star Wars trilogy, the one-man Lord of the Rings. And this is one of the only ways your show can be profitable, because if you have to pay out all of these different expenses, you have to sort of keep the number of actors very low, and then you have to provide something pop culture that's going to sell tickets. And so this is one strategy people use in Edinburgh to try to make money. Now you've also got a lot of visual pollution, corporate spam at the festival. The Virgin money is very much everywhere. For example, you can see these artists who are given these stages to play on. They're all sort of Virgin money stages. And so it's very distracting for the audience to try to watch the performance because of all of this corporate branding. It's also, you know, on things like garbage cans, billboards, banners. It's really all over the place. Now, what's interesting is that in Edinburgh there is actually a free fringe. So they do have a similar thing to the infringement, this idea that, you know, maybe we shouldn't participate in this overly corporate version, but maybe try to bring it back to its roots. And so this is one called the Free Fringe, the PBH Free Fringe, Peter Buckley Hill. But unlike the infringement, where anyone can do what they want, here it's curated. And so if you can persuade him that, you know, your show's good, he will let you play at this version of the Free Fringe. Now, the Free Fringe also has a set of ethos and conditions. And so this is something that I definitely encourage anyone doing Fringe, is to try to create some sort of mandate which has you know, policies that are protecting the artist and things like that. So this is what he's trying to do. The infringement also has a similar mandate. And the difference is, you know, this is a show of the PBH Free Fringe, and this is Kat Brogan, you know, and she was a spokesperson for the Occupy movement in London. She was in the media. Like, her show was on fire, you know, she was playing the Bowron. It was really hot performance poetry, very political. And, you know, she's the type of person who wouldn't even be able to afford to play the Fringe necessarily. So this is a great opportunity for her. So you can see the real difference in the types of performances that you might experience based on an artist's financial ability to pay. So it's a real question of, is history repeating itself here? You know, originally you had the Edinburgh International Festival, which sparked off the creation of the Fringe as a sort of protest against that. Now we're seeing all of these free fringes forming as a protest against the fringe that's seen as being too corporatized. So you've got stuff like the PBH Free Fringe, you've got the Laughing Horse Free Fringe, something new called the Forest Fringe, there's something new called the Freestival, And so, you know, you can see a fragmenting of what was originally an event where everyone was included, it was run by artists, and it was free. And now you can see there's a real Darwinian mess sort of unfolding, you know, in these cultural spaces. Now the Fringe brand has sustained a lot of damage over the years, which waters it down. It sort of, you know, compromises its potency, it dulls its edge. And so a lot of people are asking, is this more of a marketing event for corporations than an actual festival for artists? And so if you go there, you can see there's a lot of, you know, the marketing is just about everywhere. It's almost impossible to escape it. And so this is where the infringement strikes back. So basically what I tried to do when I was at the World Fringe Fair, this is where fringe festivals around the world present their festivals to the public. So I was trying to present a different version, you know, a version that's more activist. I had the red squares, I had the mask, you know, I had the Buffalo infringement program and things like this. And so you can sort of see, like, this is what it looks like with all of these people gathering there. And, you know, this was the information that I was trying to distribute. I was trying to show people that there is an alternative potentially. And what we basically proposed is that to try and bring the fringe back to its roots, to try to prevent all of these problems, is to look at these issues and to think about, you know, can we create policies to deal with these issues, or is it just going to get worse and worse and worse? So things like unethical sponsors, conflict of interest sponsors, the visual pollution, the pay-to-play fees, the service charges in the box office, the trademarking, the legal threats for the use of the word fringe, the censorship, kicking artists out, banning political artists, exclusion, favoritism, security guards, bag searches, hierarchy, corporate structure, naming rights, cross-branding, and corporate manipulation and interference. And so these are all issues that I personally think need to be looked at, and need to, you know, policies need to be developed around these issues if the fringe is going to be protected against just an endless, you know, an endless corporatization. I mean, if no line is drawn, it could end up imploding upon itself, as has been suggested in the past. This is Peter Buckley Hill, by the way, so I didn't meet him. And another interesting thing is that at this time, Pussy Riot was very much getting into a lot of trouble. They were being jailed. And so there was talk in Edinburgh of getting some people together and trying to rally in support of them. And unfortunately, it wasn't even able to come together. And so this is the largest arts festival on earth. We're unable to get people together to support what I think is probably one of the most fringe acts in the world. And that's because in Edinburgh, everyone's trying to sell their tickets, pass out flyers. They're basically trying to survive with all of you know, these different people competing for the same spectators. So people didn't really have a lot of time to go and support something like that, which I thought was unfortunate.
What the fringe?
Okay, so basically when I went home, you can see I was exhausted. It's like now I'm quite exhausted. These festivals do take a toll. So this is what I did. I tried to raise awareness. I tried to challenge the discourse. I asked some critical questions. I demanded action. I questioned direction. And I set the stage for 2014. Now, the infringement today, we've got two permanent festivals, Montreal and Buffalo. Festivals have also been held in places like Ottawa, Toronto, Regina, Hamilton, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Bordeaux, France as well. So it's the type of thing that can just pop up as a one-off, but in some cases it does take root. Infringement is both a global movement and it's also an art form. So there is a slogan that was started in Buffalo in 2011, infringe every day. And so this is something that people can actually use on a daily basis to try to infringe against all of that monoculture that sort of creeps into the corner of everyone's lives. Okay, now this is where things get a little bit heavy. This is us visiting the Fringe a couple of years ago. Basically, we were told we were not allowed in. And so we're going to just screen a little video here just to show you what this exclusion actually looks like. Because this could be happening more and more often at these festivals. if people continue excluding people.
You did not fill out the paperwork, have any shows here, or do any showing or anything, and we are allowed to bar anyone who wants.
So you're telling me I'm not allowed into a public space on my birthday?
It's actually not, it's public, but it's, we filled out the paperwork, we are allowed to have our events here, you're out.
Well, it's just a birthday, what does that have to do here? Everybody's gonna say happy birthday.
No, it's fine, but unfortunately you can't come.
Alright, so what's the border? Where's the border? The fridge is here. Here, is it on the sidewalk?
Like at the sidewalk.
And so this, for example, I couldn't do something here?
No, sir.
Would you mind actually pointing out the exact boundary just so we know?
The boundary would be the sidewalk. You're very well with the sidewalk, Kelly.
So can I have a beer on the sidewalk?
If it's your own beer, go right ahead.
Yeah, I asked you to buy me one. I'm just asking you to bring it over here.
Why can't, why, you don't want us to support town laws though?
No, we don't need your support.
Well, I guess we should get some shots that are the boundaries so we know. You know briefly about the Charter of Human Rights? You heard of the Canadian Constitution? You know what section 2B stands for? Freedom of expression.
Express all you want.
Well, how can we?
How am I allowed to?
Yes, you're saying we're not allowed to go past.
You're not allowed to go inside there.
Well, then you certainly have stopped me.
Yeah, you're not going to do what you like on the sidewalk.
Bon, parce que c'est ma fête, je veux prendre quelqu'un.
Il va pas me laisser rentrer parce que je t'ai dit bonjour.
Exactement. Exactement.
Désolé. Désolé, mais
Anyone who knows that is not allowed in?
Curious, man.
Why is this man not allowed in? Excuse me, this is a fucking local resident.
I'm a local resident, and I've been a volunteer for years at this event. So if you have a personal problem, you talk to me.
What is
I
it?
have no problem with anybody here.
What is this event that you've been involved here?
The fringe, hello?
To the Fringe Festival, we're denying artists the right to enter. We need a camera crew here. Immediately, we need the chalk here ASAP.
You understand? Because you do here that much, like, public space. And we know this, other world councils, we know they make sure they know about I also work for other organizations too. I have to be part of Infringement. So basically, anyone remotely associated with this guy doesn't get it.
Watch out, they're not letting certain people in.
If you're
associated with me, you're not allowed in.
Are you serious?
Don't say happy birthday to me. They won't let you in. Words on the street.
On the sidewalk?
Yeah.
That's not our property, that's not our business. You can take that up with the council in the city. They will tell you if you can or you can't.
Please take call.
I'm going to ask you to leave right now. Okay? All right, thank you very much.
Fringe trademark order. This was like 5 minutes ago. Water. Pour it on here already. Look at this. Censorship. Very fucking it. You're fucking censoring us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is censorship right at the core. Enjoy. Spraying our trucks with water. Beautiful. You guys are destroying your own name. What happened to the Bill of Rights? Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. This is from Montreal to Buffalo on a double-decker bus. Over 700 open performances and events spread over 10 days. And there's a network of opportunities with leaders in the field of customer management. And no way to life is regard to the Buffalo Infringement Festival. And no corporate secrets, including no censorship, no ads, and no artistic exclusion, no censorship. And the winner is Amy Blackmore!
Okay, so you can see it's not a fun experience, you know. I mean, with the infringer, we try to do what's called culture jamming. And so culture jamming is where you do a performance that sort of tries to expose something that's maybe oppressive or hypocritical or something like that. So, you know, we've often done this at the Fringe, trying to sort of expose some of the problems. So in this case, we presented this gigantic check to give the manager a free trip to the Buffalo Infringement Festival. And of course, you know, you can see what happened. You know, it turned pretty nasty. And so, you know, this is something we don't really do as often anymore. It's really a tense situation. It's not the fun thing that the Fringe used to be at all. Now, here's another example of a culture jam. So they created something called the Kids Fringe a few years ago. So this was for children 0 to 12 years old. But the problem is that, you know, corporations spend an awful lot of money trying to advertise to children. They believe it will transform them into these lifelong customers. Now, the St. Ambroise Fringe beer tent is obviously, you know, trying to promote beer and alcohol. That's why it's been cross-branded. But it's also illegal in Quebec to advertise dangerous products to children, things like cigarettes, alcohol, prescription drugs, etc. So there's actually a law against that. But, you know, when the kids came to this Kids Fringe, instead of having a wonderful time, you know, if they wanted to have their orange juice or their apple juice, they had to reach over, you know, a bunch of beer bottles being advertised on a tablecloth. You know, instead of some nice balloons that children might enjoy, they were inflatable balloons promoting wine. If they wanted to blow bubbles, they had to do it out of a cup with the beer company on it. So basically, you can see that, you know, you've got a kid trying to just sort of enjoy an event, and yet they're absolutely surrounded by all of these corporate ads for alcohol. So basically, the infringement came to the rescue on this particular day. They were talking about boycotting St. Ambroise because, of course, it's illegal to advertise to kids. And so using chalk, this is something the infringement often does. We wrote beer and kids don't mix. And so this had a positive effect. In this case, they actually had to cancel this event indefinitely. And so basically, the kids no longer are subjected to this illegal advertising. Now, a better alternative is in Buffalo, where they have something called the Kidfringement. So there's no corporate advertising at all. There's no cross-branding. It's simply kids and artists playing and, you know, doing the same thing with chalk and whatever else. So, you know, it is possible to have something without all of this corporate interference. Now, for 2014, when I went back to the Congress, you know, I wanted to sort of up it a little bit more, challenge some of the corporate stakeholders. And so this time we had, for example, a workshop by the head of Virgin Money himself. So he was advising people on, you know, how to cross-brand and how to find the best corporation for your festival. So I created a show called Critical Report from the World Fringe Congress. And basically I performed it at the Harlequin Fair in Norwich, England, the PVH Free Fringe in Edinburgh, the Ballinamore Free Fringe in Ireland, but also the Montreal Infringement and the Buffalo Infringement Festival as well. So I was trying to sort of present some of these issues in a theatrical setting at a free fringe, if you will. Now in 2016, this has been a really bad year for the fringe, in my opinion. I think it's been the absolute worst that I've experienced so far. It all started, as I mentioned earlier, when a disabled volunteer in Edmonton was basically told after years and years of involvement that his services were no longer welcome. And that's because, these people were already volunteers. And so they wanted to transform their volunteers into a friend raisers team. And so they said, for instance, all volunteers on the friend raisers team must now be able to actively communicate and engage with festival patrons, both asking for donations and explaining how the festival benefits from this support. And so again, it wasn't good enough to have like 95% of the festival run by volunteers, but they actually wanted to transform those volunteers yet again into another fundraising opportunity. And so that this resulted in discrimination against the disabled. We also had another episode at the Winnipeg Fringe where Robin Slade, who was sexually assaulted there about 10 years ago, realized that this was still going on. And so she wanted to warn her students. She teaches improv about this. And so she basically went on Facebook, went to the media, and she said, oh, I've seen that behavior for years. Oh, I know, it's disgusting, it's terrible. It's specifically these older male performers who aren't hitting on women their own age. They're not hitting on women 10 years younger than them. They're hitting on women 30 and 40 years younger than them. Why doesn't anyone say anything? So again, yet another example of a horrible thing happening here at Fringe. And then they made the announcement that the 2016 World Fringe Congress was to be held here in Montreal, to be hosted by the St. Ambroise Fringe. And of course, with our relationship with the St. Ambroise Fringe, I thought, oh my God, this is probably the first time where I'm not going to be welcomed at this event. And so that's exactly what happened. You can see in 2012 there's this wonderful letter of invitation. We want you here. We like your ideas. And of course now in 2016, well, your application has been rejected. Unfortunately, you're not allowed to come here. So even though it's my own city, I wasn't welcome to help host it or anything like that. I was basically told, no, sorry, fuck off. You're not welcome here.
Fuck a friend.
Yeah. So now instead of being an infringer in the group, I've been excluded from the Congress, and so that was kind of hurtful, but kind of expected given all of these forces at play as well. So basically, I wrote a letter of complaint to Shona McCarthy back here. So thank you, Shona, for answering it. I asked her. I said, I'm asking you to intervene and to overturn the decision to ban all Montreal and Buffalo infringement artists from the CAF-hosted World Fringe Congress. And in all fairness, she did respond in a way that I thought was reasonable enough. She mentioned that in Edinburgh, they model themselves in a different way from here. In Edinburgh, many different models of the fringe are allowed to exist. But unfortunately, contractually, the running of this event here was from the Canadian Association of Fringe Festivals. And so there was nothing she could do about it. So thank you, Shona, for at least listening, It's too bad we couldn't have gone around that, but I guess that's contractual, right? Okay, so what we did in response is we decided, because we weren't allowed to go there, we decided to challenge them to a debate. And so this debate, we were hoping it might happen this afternoon, but we haven't heard back from them, but we created a resolution. And so the resolution is consistent with the United Nations policy on the common heritage of humankind. Be it resolved that the word fringe should be untrademarked in Canada and protected from trademarking in all other parts of the world to ensure its viability for future generations. So this is one of the strategies that we use. We also had a whole infringement festival that's still going on. It's going to be finishing up tomorrow night. And of course the World Infringement Congress is also very much part of this strategy as well, to prevent a sort of parallel event, to present a critical voice that might not have been heard at the Congress. Now this is also something we've been asking people in the community, can you support these excluded artists? Can you speak out? And most people said, well, you know, we're sorry to hear about this, but we need to remain neutral. So we heard this again and again, and so there wasn't a lot of support. But we did get this message of solidarity from Professor Alan Filewad at the University of Guelph. He's very much Canada's leading expert on activist forms of theatre, things like agitprop, workers' theatre, stuff like that. And so he says, I want to extend the hand of solidarity to all who participate in the Infringement Festival, who gather to fight for the right of freedom of expression and to reclaim the promise of the original Fringe. Open, accessible, artist-run. The corporatization of Fringe festivals is a betrayal of what was once the most democratic development in Canadian theatre. I congratulate you for standing against it in the cause of diversity, inclusivity, and free assembly. In solidarity, Professor Alan Filewad, University of Guelph. And so, you know, part of this is, you know, if we have all this indifference, if everyone's going to remain neutral, none of these issues are ever going to be looked at. None of these issues are ever going to be resolved. No policies will ever be made to try to prevent these types of things from happening in the future that, you know, exclude artists or basically cause artists to be associated with things they might not want or charge them too much money. And so basically, you know, if we want to sort of move beyond this, we cannot be indifferent because otherwise it's going to continue. So why challenge the corporatization of the Fringe? You know, I mean, for me, it's not just a matter of challenging it because it's become extremely unfair to people like artists and spectators and communities, but it's because I mentioned earlier, it's this idea of if we're to get out of the late capitalist society that we're in now, that's very much really destroying the world as we know it, we actually need our Fringe as sort of a place where we can operate. And we need to start on the Fringe and start moving in against some of the other things. I mean, you can't just start by reclaiming a government that's been corrupted by capitalism, for example, or an education system or something like that. But maybe if you can start on the Fringe, then you can sort of move in from there. And so those are pretty much the reasons why I think it's very important to try and reclaim the Fringe as much as possible, to prevent it from doing what it's been doing, but also I think it's important to create other alternatives, things like the Infringement, which is sort of a parallel model. And so basically, in a nutshell, this is why we're here today. This is why this dispute has been going on for a good 15 years already, and which is why it's still not resolved yet, and maybe never will be. So just to conclude things, the World Fringe Congress #3, this just ended yesterday. There's about probably over 300 Fringe festivals now around the world, I would think. They're multiplying quickly, of course, with things like the World Fringe Congress. They can sort of go in there, and without people like the Infringement speaking, they're going to be encouraged to be the corporate types of models. So the best way to prevent the corporate takeover of fringes is to challenge this discourse of the managers and to promote the concept of infringement. To think critically, to speak out, to encourage others to do so as well, and also to challenge all corporate interference in the arts and culture and to demand safeguards at your local fringe festival. You can also participate in infringement festivals and free fringes, support them, or even establish new infringement festivals in other places. We do have a how-to guide, and of course you can also infringe every day if you like. And so to wrap things up, I wanted to thank everyone for coming out this afternoon. I know there's probably a lot of people with a lot of different ideas. We have fringe managers here in the room. We have infringement artists as well. So please, let's not kill each other. We're just trying to have a conversation. You know, we're just trying to protect artists and protect the fringe. We're not trying to be a bunch of jerks, although it might seem like that sometimes. So again, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to open the floor for a question and answer period. So there we have it. Questions? Yes?
It seems to me that the major problem with the Fringe Festival is not spend their money in advertising. The corporations do that because it's a good venue to advertise in, and it's probably relatively cheap to do. But that couldn't happen without the management of the various fringe festivals. So I don't understand why your infringement festival wastes any time at all going after the fringe. Why don't you just spend that same energy in expanding the infringement festival with the philosophies that you have, and embed those philosophies into any future openings of infringement festivals? But you can't have an infringement festival unless you do this. So we answer why you waste so much energy taking on the fringe.
Well, I mean, I think you need to challenge stuff like the Fringe because it was originally a people's festival, and we can see how corrupted it's become in a sense. And so if you allow it to just endlessly become corrupted, it loses its original meaning. And to me, this is probably the most obvious example in late capitalist society. You know, it's crystal clear what the problem is. You know, the Fringe has been trademarked. You know, I mean, the Fringe should be, in my opinion, the right to play on the Fringe should be a human right. It's not something you should be able to trademark. And so because of this, we're seeing all of the problems that have happened. So if you don't challenge it, if you just create an infringement on the side, it's not fully engaging with the issue, but it's rather engaging with half the issue. So that's why. Yes.
Hi Donovan, hi everybody, I'm Shona and I'm from the Edinburgh Fringe, and I really welcome this opportunity today. I think it's great that you do this, Donovan, so I'm completely supportive. But I just wanted to set a couple of things right, because I know you're trying to, you know, create a particular sort of message, but the Edinburgh Festival is completely open access. It doesn't censor anybody. We've never excluded any artist. It embraces all kinds of different platforms, from free fringe to pay what you want. It's got artists who are professional artists, it's got artists who are amateurs, it's got people from communities. It doesn't exclude anybody. It's an incredible platform, and last year we had over 30,000 artists who wanted to participate in all the kind of different access points of that. The VIP piece that you talked about, and that's why I kind of pulled you on it, because those VIP areas are set up for the artists and the performers to give them an added layer of kind of comfort and support in between shows. The other thing I would say as well is that people access it at the point that they want to. Not all artists are the same. You talk about artists as if they all think exactly the same way and all want exactly the same things. There are artists who want all of the infrastructure and all of the support and the marketing and the promotion and all of that stuff. There are other artists who want to stand with a bucket at the end of their show and do it for free and collect money at the end of the show. So, you know, in the same way as not all fringes are the same, not all artists are the same, and I just wanted to say there's a few things in there that you're kind of peddling that aren't quite true.
Yeah, well, thank you for your comments and your opinion. You know, again, I don't not necessarily trying to crap all over the Edinburgh Fringe. I do think the model's a lot better than the one here. And when I was there, I did experience a lot of these free fringes and things like that. But I also experienced a lot of artists who were unhappy because they felt it was almost impossible to make any money, and because there was almost, you know, corporate advertising everywhere and things like that. So I do appreciate your comments, and you know, I hope we can carry on this conversation in the future. So, yeah.
It's a very important dialogue, but just reading the leaf heavy. I'm Adam Patrick, the director of the Stockholm Fringe, also the Gothenburg Fringe, and next is Norway Fringe. To state that we've gathered here to talk about how to make money out of artists, how to talk about trademarking the fringe. I don't recognize any of this from the last 3 days. We have 120 really passionate people who are talking about art and how to protect ourselves against forces like Trump.
Okay, good.
It was one of the discussion groups that we had. I did not attend the 2014 at the Congress. I do not identify with Edinburgh because it's such a huge festival. We have a whole different mechanism. And just like you talked about, every fringe is different. What unites us is supporting the artist. And I know if you left of some, it could seem to be dirty to take help from the third world. We work with only ethical partners at Stockholm.
Oh, okay. So maybe that's something you can share with other festivals to create a
But I
policy.
would say that most of them would do. I wasn't aware of the problems they've had or have not had here in Canada and the conflict that was going on. I'm surprised they did not up to Congress because I met at the first one. I had very great memories of our test there. So I think it's a mistake they didn't invite you because it wouldn't hurt to have this dialogue. But a little bit your keynote, a little bit black or white, and dragging people through the mud who are more on your side than you think. So it's just a little bit more nuance. There's not just black and white in this movement. It's such a huge movement, and we all come from very different perspectives. And I am, we're a festival that's run by artists, and we created 40 artists. At the same time, we do think to help these artists. We can't just rely on government help. And corporate sponsors can be okay. There are ethical corporations out there. This is important too. It's not black and white. And this is an important dialogue. It's better you do this. But it's a little bit less black and white paint because it's hard to have a dialogue and make people listen to you if you paint them black without necessarily all the reason for it. Anyway, yeah.
Okay, well,
So
thanks.
thank you. It's very good to be here, but a bit more nuance is the deal.
Yeah, just to let you know, I mean, the theory behind the infringement is it's a theory that I created called the octative theory. It's this idea of the artist playing the provocateur, so it's sort of agitprop. It's sort of an art form in itself, and so I know a lot of people get upset about it, and some people think it's too black and white, but sometimes that's the nature of this type of theater. Agitprop kind of pokes something in the eye, it tries to raise an issue, and but I agree. I mean, my goal isn't to alienate everyone; it's to have a dialogue. And I do appreciate your comments because maybe things do need to be toned down. Certainly, we've toned them down a lot in the last few years. It used to be a lot, crazier in the past. Yes.
Hi, I'm Kerry. I'm the director of the Sydney Fringe Festival in Australia. I loved this morning, can I just say? Thank you. I'm taking away a bunch of this stuff. I just felt like I wanted to make a couple of comments from the last few days at Congress in what was brought up today. I think what's really opened my eyes having the Congress here this year, and I was at the last one at Edinburgh, that was my first one, was the amount of festivals in North America that really are still volunteer artist run. There's a huge amount of them. Certainly the largest percentage of represented festivals that the last 3 days were run like that. And we have the exact same issues, and it's something that I have been dealing with at home about that balance of funding going to administrators. But I would argue very strongly that the bulk of festival directors and administrators that I know are practicing artists who have worked their whole life on barely any money as well. And I certainly know in my experience that my annual salary at Fringe bolsters up my 2 artist-run venues that I personally own, and the only reason I can still do that is because I have a full-time gig at the Fringe Festival. And so I think that it's a valid argument, but it's possibly in the wrong area of the sector, because I think that the bulk of professional arts administrators in the fringe world are actually artists and have come from creative backgrounds as well. So yeah, but I love this and I love to listen to it.
Hi, I'm Julian Caddy. I'm the Managing Director of Brighton Fringe in the south of England. I echo, I think, pretty much everything that's been said so far. I'm also a performer and a sometime writer, and I have also found the need to take over an ability to have some influence in a marketplace that I care about a lot. But the reality of that marketplace is that you need money in order to be able to make a difference. This is a corporate world. You talked about it earlier. It's not necessarily something that we like or want. Maybe I'm an apologist that you talked about. And I would gladly look for a different system. And I think that you're saying an awful lot of things that are very, very important for us to question. And within the environment that I work in the UK, you can set up a fringe. There have been plenty of fringes that exist around Brighton and around the UK as well, which don't adhere to the same systems or policies or what have you. Within the Canadian system, it's a word. You can just call yourselves an open festival. People don't really give a flying whatever about. A lot of people don't even understand what the word fringe means. Indeed, one of the debates we had at the Fringe Congress this week was, what is a fringe? And they spent 2 hours floating around the subject, and not really everybody agrees, because a fringe is whatever you want it to be. So I think what this gentleman said here about focusing very much on attacking, or certainly having a healthy critical debate about the CAF fringe model might be negatively affecting your ability to deliver what you truly care about, which is delivering a platform for artists and creating something which is a true alternative, that isn't seen as something negative and conflict orientated, which we got that from when we talked to people involved, when we received the letter from the solicitor, demanding an explanation, and you're completely within your rights to ask those questions. However, I think we're as artists who have very little money, very little time, you are worth more than that. And I think that the general artist community is worth more than that. And I would applaud you with what you're doing, but I think that the energies are spent, if your energies are spent even 50% more on developing an effective network as an alternative, then people will come. People vote with their bums in seats. And it is something that can easily happen. And I think that the success of the Free Fringe movement in Edinburgh has been testament to that. And it's been a pain in the arse for the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society to deal with this thing. But that's been a good thing as well. We have to ask these questions. It is what was born out of the fringe movement in 1947, 1948 was something that needed to happen. And if we don't ask questions, then we're never going to move forward as a unit, together or apart. So anyway, that's all.
Yeah, so just as a little rebuttal, so thank you for your comments, but yes, I don't think just ignoring this problem is going to make it go away, so hence the engagement. But there's also other issues. For example, we still haven't even repaid our ticket sales from when we got kicked out of the Fringe in 2001. So are you just going to allow yourself to be steamrollered as an artist, or are you going to fight back in some way?
Of course you have to talk. When there are details in pieces like that, if you've been badly treated, then you have recourse for action, and that is important that you pursue that. But it's more than this. I think that, of course, there are plenty of issues that I personally deal with venues not paying artists, and we are actively working to do that. If we didn't have the staff to be able to do that, we wouldn't be able to support the artists in that way. But so yeah, you're completely within your rights and to do whatever you need to do that. I think ultimately in the long term, beyond the personalities and the individual things that this Fringe Festival may or may not have done to affect your ability to pursue your artist's way and those of many others. It's going beyond that and looking at the bigger picture. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Fergus?
I just wanted to defend a little bit the St. Ambroise thing that you were talking about, showing St. Ambroise particularly. Only because I knew Peter McLaughlin quite well, who actually started that beer company. And he's always had a very deep caring for supporting artists. He doesn't throw money at the big guys. You don't see him a centaur, but you see him quite often in anything to do with the arts. So the image was a little bit, I think, off, because I think he actually always cared. So, it just kind of looked, there may be a capitalist, maybe make some money out of it now, and actually he sold the company 2 years ago, so he's probably not as involved.
Oh, he's not, I didn't realize he sold it.
But I know from speaking to him that he always really cared about the art. So, it gives a little bit of a
Okay, now we're just gonna take a few more questions because I know some people have to leave soon. It's 12:25, just to let you know. So, Liz, did you want to say
I was
something?
just gonna say that I used to work at the Centaur Theatre, and Peter McGoslin was on the board, so he helps them out too. And they're struggling too, but it doesn't change the fact that this Fringe Festival that we're talking about here today is very heavily subsidized. For a festival of its size in the city, and the size of the administration, and the salaries that they're making, I just wanted to put that out there.
I'm not saying that anything other than Peter McLaughlin here. I mean, if you make some money out of it.
Very nice person.
Kath?
I think what you're doing is very valid. I think the infringement idea, the idea of really challenging corporate sponsorship and pursuing the idea of ethical sponsorship is really valid. And I think it knocks on our doors and it just reminds us that that's really ideally what we should be doing. We all know that that's what we should be doing. And I really support that. I really support I don't necessarily agree with, but I can see why you're supporting, you're challenging the Fringe trademark. I can really see that. I can see why they've done it, why they did it, but I can see why you're challenging it. So in that sense, I think that what you're doing is great. Some of it, I think for me, that's where your focus is really powerful, and I think that's where your focus should be.
Yeah.
In not necessarily just say this is the positive message of what we represent is we are supporting ethical sponsorship when you're working with artists, and we challenge the trademark.
Yeah.
I think those things are good. Some of the other things I'm not supporting, and I agree with everything else that you guys are saying, but those things are positive messages, and I think that makes quite a powerful statement, to be honest.
Yeah, and we are actually in touch with Harold Ashenmill, the famous trademark lawyer who defended the Red Square. And in his opinion, this trademark would not stand in federal court. So basically, it is possible to take it away. It is going to cost about $8,000, so that's a lot of money. But it's quite possible that that's one way of dealing with the issue, because this is the only place in the world where there's a trademark on the word Fringe. It doesn't exist anywhere else.
Sally, like we've been able to protect the Fringe from getting hijacked by a corporation to create something own. That we have worked for as volunteers and artists for years. We have, in fact, registered the name Fringe in Sweden, but that is to protect the movement, not to make it a commercial.
Yes, that's why I can
it
see
has
why
different
they did it.
functions,
Yeah.
and it's important to.
But do you think someone should be allowed to come and do what they want on the Fringe, or do you think you should have the right to control who gets to play there, what people get to do? Because the original Fringe was for anyone.
From a company who comes with a lot of money to start their own Fringe and hijack the movement. Yes. So I think it should be where the artists. It should be what it is, at least in our case. But because the Fringe it's growing in popularity, it's growing in strength, it is becoming a more attractive thing for somebody to come and hijack. So in my case, it is protecting the movement. It's not trying to own the Fringe.
But that's what they argued at the Canadian Association of Fringe Festivals in the beginning too. And we can see that this is clearly not the case today. So
that's a slippery slope.
Yeah, it's a very slippery slope. And again, it's like the original Fringe was simply artists protesting against exclusion. There was no other elements involved. That's what it was. And now, of course, there's all these crazy corporate formulae applied. It's just not the same thing anymore. And is it possible to get back to that? I don't know. Maybe it isn't.
But it was also the things change as time and as the needs of the world and your communities change as well.
Yeah.
And things grow and they develop into things. And it's okay that a new movement comes up that is the infringement or is something else that is suiting the needs of artists and time and place, and that an old movement becomes what it is.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's less productive to hark back to, but it was about this, well, it is now this. Yeah, and that's okay too.
Because it's really worth noting that
it does a lot of good as well.
And things evolve. And it was the very artists that started the Fringe in Edinburgh who decided that they needed a structure and that they needed to set up a fringe society. I mean, it wasn't imposed upon them, it was the artists themselves who come up with that model. So, you know, it's things evolve, things change.
No, but also ironically, we're now at a stage where like the infringement is based on that original fringe of 1947, and are now being excluded from a World Fringe Congress.
That's a mistake.
Yeah, I mean,
And I like that.
yeah.
That it should, I think a number of things that you focused on in this presentation are city-centric, and it shouldn't be transplanted to the whole fringe sector. And and if it was run in a different, but if you know, I would argue that. I mean, certainly I wouldn't have excluded you from that Congress or conversation had it been a Sydney-hosted thing. And I think that some issues with sponsorship that you raised in this are like eyebrow raising that wouldn't necessarily, that's a management issue, it's not a fringe-wide issue. And so I think it's just about, you know, Kath's right in that clear and precise messaging of your movement is way more powerful than bringing in some of those other things, because it's not fair necessarily or correct to paint the whole fringe sector with those brushes of what's going on here, because the trademark thing is very specific to here, doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, so anyone can start a fringe and do their thing. And also, yeah, a lot of that stuff is not necessarily as it would be everywhere else.
Yeah, well, thanks the people who've come from the international diaspora to comment and share your time. It was really nice to see you all here. My name is James. I've been in and out of involvement with the Infringe since its debut, and I've also been an employee with the established Fringe Festival. So I come from like both sides and playing middle ground kind of thing. One thing that I wanted to bring up though about this local fringe that gets in me sometimes is a little bit of exploitation of free labor and its transference or lack of transference to assistance to the artist in the sense that I find a lot of times volunteer labor is used in the fringe here and compensated by the fact that they go to see shows for free, which means that a lot of the audience that comes to see some of the shows aren't paying the artist. So that isn't transferred. And a lot of pressure is put on volunteers to do a lot of work and do a lot of extra time and overtime, and they're only paid in like what, the free tickets to go see free shows, which again.
Or beer tickets.
Sorry?
Or tickets to the beer tent.
Or tickets to the beer tent. Yeah, but it doesn't get it doesn't assist the artists in any way other than having bums and seats to see the shows. But sometimes there are artists who perform a show and there's 5 people in the audience and 4 of them aren't paying anything. It just seems something that maybe they should tweak it or fix it, because it's unfair for the artists sometimes, and they put a lot of pressure on volunteers that come and put a lot of the work and give them a lot of work and expectations on their shoulders. So I don't know if that happens in other fringes or what the model is, but that's one thing that I would like to see fixed. And me being an employee means I got to stick at it. It's a very low wage for the hours that I end up giving them. A venue technician, by the way. So, and I don't mind. I mean, yes, I get it, because I also have the opportunity to be part of the problem in the sense that the first thing they give me is a pass that says, okay, now here you can go see shows without paying the artist anything either, you know. And I always like, oh, I'll go see a show, but I'll donate something, you know. If I can, because they don't pay me a lot. So I try to support the artists as much as I can, but employees and volunteers, I tend to see sometimes can get overused, or the demands on them can be really high sometimes.
Okay, thank you.
I know we're running out of time, but my name is Robert Hollins. I'm a university professor who studies fringes, and also my wife runs the Prague Fringe Festival as well, which doesn't adopt either a CAF or an Edinburgh model, but it's something very, very different. Again, emphasising that point about the diversity of fringes. Well, I mean, I just want to reiterate again, I think having the conversation is a really important thing. And not wanting to speak for you, but I think one of your motivations is the same motivation that everybody probably in the room has, that we all recognise that fringe has the potential, has a potential to transform people's lives, not only just artists, but audiences as well, and communities. That's the easy thing, that's the thing we all have in common. The difficult thing is to say, well, how do we best do that? If that's the one thing we can agree on, then how do we best move Fringe in that direction? And I think that's why this conversation is such an important one. That's the hard bit. That's the hard road to do. The question is, I agree again. This debate could have happened over the last 3 days as well. Some of these debates were happening. We have been talking. There has been some discussion of corporatisation within Fringe. There have been a lot of people talking about Trump, obviously, and talking about how this is going to change things. So, this is happening. What is happening? It's a question of how we can move forward.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's great that those things are being discussed, and hopefully the next Congress, the next one's in Edinburgh, right? So hopefully if I'm invited to that one, we can maybe try to talk more about these types of issues.
This is your invitation right now, Donovan. Come and
Thank you once again, everyone. It's a real pleasure to see you all. We have a lunch spread here, and we're going to take some time to eat, and then after lunch we're going to continue with some more presentations. For those of you who have to go, thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate that. Okay, so on the note of local community arts empowerment and local activists using the arts for the benefit of the community, because we've changed the schedule a little bit, in case you're unaware, just because we have those people here who have to take flights out. So what we're going to do, if it's okay, is we'll go next with the Save the Main, and we're going to finish with the Buffalo presentation. I'm assuming the CAF are not coming for the debate that we've invited them to, so we can use this time for our own project. So next up, I would like to welcome Velma. Where is Velma?
I'm here.
Back here, and Ari. And so Velma was involved with a coalition called Save the Main, which helped save the Cafe Cleopatra, where we had these wonderful burlesque performers last night. And then Ari actually made a short film about saving the venue, which went on to win multiple awards in film festivals all over the world, which I think is quite exceptional. So please welcome Ari and Velma to the stage. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce our final presentation of the afternoon. We have an amazing group of burlesque performers who come from the Buffalo Infringement Festival. They did a great show last night at the Cafe Cleopatra. So I'd like to present Kat McCarthy and friends for the last part, which is about the Buffalo Infringement Festival. So that wraps up our World Infringement Congress today. So I thought maybe we should get everyone who was involved in presenting, maybe to make a group photo or something like that. I mean, now that I'm excluded from the other Congress, I need to get a photo where I don't have an X in my face. There's lots of shows still going on. It's all online.
First show goes on around 5.
Thank you, Donovan.
I love this costume. It's incredible.
This is what I had in the car, Just had the gold jumpsuit. I was like, if I don't wear the jumpsuit, I'm going to regret it.